Lviv now as we welcome dperry in. Dan, the former Associated Press chief editor for Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. What's the reaction been, say, there in Israel to all this?
Look, most Israelis view this as a PR stunt, and they're certainly right in as much as the aid that is being carried on these ships is very trivial compared to the aid that goes in any case, with hundreds of trucks a day. I think, even though there is significant disagreement in Israel over the nature of the war and the tactics of the army, I think there's close to consensus that Israel had no choice but to enforce its blockade. The blockade itself of Gaza is not without logic, and it's been in place since Hamas took over and began to turn Gaza into a garrison state, clearly primed for eventually attacking Israel, which is precisely what occurred. There's another dispute about whether Israel had the right to engage these ships in international waters. But, 1,000 lawyers will not be able to reach conclusion on that issue, because the fundamental legal question is, does Israel have a right to impose its blockade? And that would mean preventing these ships from reaching the 12 nautical miles off the coast of Gaza.
Right.
By and large, however, I think there's relief that the thing was peaceful and they were all brought to port and given sandwiches and probably will be deported shortly thereafter.
Right. The wider issue of the war itself and the Trump peace plan that's been getting a lot of attention, and how Hamas will eventually respond to that. Where's this all going, Dan?
It is a remarkable situation, because even though much of the world dislikes the brutality of Israel's conduct in this war, I think there's pretty close to consensus supporting Israel's goals, which are not just the return of their hostages, but a removal of this terrorist group from the governance of Gaza, and to force its disarming. So the plan proposed by Trump essentially aligns with Israel's goals. It gives a few carrots to Hamas. I mean, they would get to, have won the release of some 100 prisoners, Israel called them terrorists, held by Israel. But basically, these are surrender terms for Hamas. The Palestinian population at large in Gaza, of course, wants this. I mean, and of course would very much welcome the removal of Hamas, which has basically taken the population hostage. But as for Hamas itself, it's impossible to predict. The indications from Izzadin al-Haddad, their leader on the ground in Gaza, are negative. But on the other hand, they're in inglorious isolation, because not only the West and the U.S., but the entire Arab League supports the deal, including Qatar, which has been their erstwhile patron and funder. So we have here an absurd situation where Israel is being accused of genocide by various parties, certainly by the Palestinians, but the party that is supposedly suffering the genocide is taking its time in agreeing to whether the war should end.
Here we have
It's
3
as
days.
tragic as it is. It's as tragic as it is absurd. I can't predict which way it's going to go, but it is relevant that on the same day that Qatar basically accepted Netanyahu's apology for the violation of their sovereignty some weeks back in the strike against Hamas leaders, and that they announced the plan, Qatar also was a beneficiary of an executive order essentially extending NATO-like levels of security guarantees by the U.S. Now, I have to think, and indeed I have to hope, that unprecedented generosity on the part of the U.S., almost mind-bendingly wonderful from the perspective of Qatar, comes with some strings whereby they will really have to use all the levers at their disposal, and these levers exist, to ensure that one way or another, after all the obfuscations and discussions and buying time, Hamas will in the end be compelled to surrender and receive agree to their deal. Yeah.
3 days. President said 3 or 4, so maybe tomorrow we'll see. Live from Tel Aviv, dperry.